The grand hall of the celestial spire, a marvel of transparent alloys and floating galleries, hummed with the subdued chatter of the galaxy's elite. They had gathered for the final concert of the renowned pianist, a man whose name was synonymous with technical perfection. His hands, insured for millions, were instruments of famed precision. Tonight was to be a celebration of his craft, and as a gesture of what he called inclusive patronage, he had included a local prodigy, a blind girl from the city's low-gravity districts, as the opening act. It was widely seen as a charitable novelty. The girl waited in the wings, her posture still. She wore a simple, dark dress, her fingers tracing the braille notes on a data slate on her lap. A guide harness, a sleek band around her temples, interfaced with the hall's spatial mapping to help her navigate. A murmur of sympathy, tinged with boredom, rippled through the audience as she was led to the colossal concert grand piano, a shimmering artifact from Earth itself. The great pianist, watching from the shadows of the opposite wing, allowed a faint, condescending smile to touch his lips. He had heard her once, a simple, emotional piece, charming for a child, amateurish for a stage like this. Her performance began. It was a pleasant, well-rehearsed sonata. The notes were clean, the feeling genuine but contained. It was the performance of a gifted student. The audience offered polite, warm applause. As she finished and stood for a bow, the great pianist, feeling magnanimous and perhaps a need to underscore the contrast in their status, strode onto the stage. He took the microphone, placing a hand on the piano's lid. "Thank you, my dear," he said, his voice projected to the farthest seats. "A delightful and brave effort. It reminds us all that music is a journey, and we must all start somewhere, regardless of our limitations." He paused, letting the word hang. To play with true mastery, one must not only feel the music, but see its architecture, understand its geography upon the keys. It is a visual art as much as an auditory one. Your spirit is commendable. The girl had turned her head toward the sound of his voice. Her expression, usually serene, did not change, but a slight stiffening of her shoulders was visible to those in the front rows. The pianist, misinterpreting her silence for awe, smiled and gestured for her to depart. The audience shifted uncomfortably. The patronizing tone was unmistakable. Instead of moving toward the wings, the girl took a small step forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and calm, amplified by the hall's acoustics. "Sir," she said, "may I play again?" A startled whisper went through the crowd. The pianist blinked, his smile faltering. It was a breach of protocol. "My child, the program is set. My performance is next. Perhaps another time." "Please," she said, her unseeing gaze seeming to look past him. "I would like to play a piece I have been working on. It is for this piano. I have studied its resonance charts." The head of the concert committee, flustered, was about to intervene when an old man, the girl's teacher, and a former composer of some renown, stood from his seat. "Let her play," he said, his voice carrying authority. "The instrument is tuned. The time is yours." He stared down the pianist, who, with a theatrical sigh of indulgence, waved a hand. "Very well. A short piece. We must not tire our generous audience." He retreated to the side, his arms crossed, a picture of strained benevolence. The girl turned back to the piano. She did not sit. Instead, she reached out and let her fingers hover just above the keys. The hall fell utterly silent. This was not the posture of a student. This was the focus of a predator, a sculptor assessing her marble. She began. The first notes were not notes at all, but a whisper of sound, a brushing of strings deep inside the piano's body. Created by pressing keys with such delicate precision, it elicited harmonics no one knew the instrument possessed. It was the sound of stellar dust coalescing. Then a single clear middle C, which hung in the air and began to multiply, echoing itself through complex pedaling until it became a chord, then a cascade of chords that did not follow terrestrial harmony, but something older, something spatial. She was not just playing the piano, she was activating it. Her hands flew across the keys, not with the flamboyant strikes of the virtuoso, but with the exact, certain touches of a programmer writing code into reality. Bass rumbles mimicked the gravitational groan of a neutron star. Treble passages became a scintillating, chaotic rain of radiation through a nebula. She used the entire structure of the instrument, knocking on its wooden frame for the pulse of a distant engine, strumming the open strings below the lid for the whisper of solar winds. And she did not see the keys. Her head was often tilted upward, as if watching the story unfold in the space above the crowd. Her guide harness, usually for navigation, was pulsing with light. Her teacher later explained she had rewired it, not to map the hall, but to translate real-time astronomical data from the Galactic Observatory into tactile feedback. She was playing the symphony of the local cluster, the dance of stars and planets only she, in this moment, could hear and feel. The audience was transported. The transparent walls of the celestial spire seemed to dissolve. People saw the crimson swirl of a gas giant, felt the silent passage of a comet through the void, witnessed the violent, beautiful birth of a star system in a surge of thunderous chords and glittering, high-octave trails. A diplomat from a desert world wept as she perfectly rendered the sound of wind over singing sands, a sound he thought existed only in his home's legends. An engineer from a mining colony felt his heart clench at the perfect replication of crystalline asteroids chiming against a hull. It was music, but it was also a map, a history, a truth, the piece built to a crescendo that was not loud but vast. It was the point of view shifting, pulling back from the chaos and beauty to reveal the incomprehensible, peaceful silence that cradled it all. The final note was not struck by a finger, but created by the slow release of a pedal, allowing a single vibrating string to fade into the absolute quiet of the hall. The sound did not end. It seemed to travel outward, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. For a long moment, there was nothing. No applause, no movement. Every person, from the lowest gallery to the concert committee, was adrift in the void she had created, and then departed. Then a single pair of hands clapped. It was the old teacher, his face wet with tears. It broke the spell. The applause that followed was not the polite patter from before. It was a physical force, a roar of approval that shook the floating walkways. People stood, shouting, their expressions awestruck, shattered, and rebuilt. The blind girl, having finished, simply bowed her head and placed a hand on the piano, feeling its fading vibrations. The great pianist stood frozen in the wing where he had watched the entire performance. His face, once a mask of cultivated superiority, was pale. His famous hands hung limp at his sides. He had spent a lifetime mastering every note Beethoven and Chopin had ever written. He had conquered the geography of the keys. But this girl had not played the piano. She had played the universe. And, in the face of that, his mastery felt like a child's recital. He did not perform his scheduled piece that night. No one could have followed that act. The committee announced an intermission that became the remainder of the evening, as the crowd refused to disperse, clamoring for the girl who had been quietly led away by her teacher. The story did not end in that hall. Recordings, taken by automated systems, flooded the galactic networks. Within hours, the performance was the only topic of conversation from Mars to the Orion outposts. Scientists analyzed the acoustic data, confirming the staggering accuracy of its celestial references. Philosophers wrote treatises on perception, arguing that her blindness was not a limitation, but a different form of sight, one that freed her from visual distraction to perceive the deeper rhythms of existence, The girl herself returned to her low-gravity district. When asked by reporters what she had played, she said simply, "I played what I see in the dark." The famous pianist canceled his remaining tour. Months later, he gave a rare interview. He was asked about that night. He looked older, his confidence replaced by a weary humility. "I thought music was a landscape to be observed and conquered," he said. "I spoke of seeing the geography of the keys. She showed me I was merely looking at a map. She played the territory. I spent my life polishing a single beautiful stone. She reminded us all of the mountain it came from. No, she did not amaze the world. She gave the world a new ear with which to hear itself. And for that, I am grateful." The girl's piece, which came to be known simply as The Dark Symphony, was added to the required curriculum at the galaxy's premier conservatories. It was a piece that could never be played the same way twice, as the stars themselves were always moving. And though many brilliant sighted musicians tried, none could ever quite capture its soul. They could play the notes, but they could not hear the music she heard. They could not see in the dark,